So, I made a video like this for the Jets, and I thought, since I am a Giants Jets fan, let me not be biased. Uh, that came out wrong. Let me make one for both teams. So, yeah, I'm not gonna make this for every 32 NFL teams because these videos take mad long to make. Like, these videos take almost a month for me to make, not just because, not because I'm lazy or anything, but because I'm too busy, and then when I have time, I'm either exhausted. Yeah, school, pretty busy. But you know what? I'll work as much as I can. So let's just, if you don't know what this is already, if you haven't seen the Jets video, basically this video is, it's basically my opinion on all the problems, issues, and things the Giants have they could fix this offseason to help prepare them for a Super Bowl run next year. And yeah, I basically go into every position. This video is going to cover the introduction and the offense. I'll make another one for the defense. I would put them in one video, but that's going to be a 40-minute video. I really don't feel like editing that. So let's just get started. So first off, what are the big problems in the Giants? Now the first big problem, and this is the biggest problem with the Giants this year, and that was their slacking offense. Now last year, or 2015-16, I guess, season, we were talking about how great this Giants offense was, how they put up 49 points in a game and lost. How they came back from being down by like 3 touchdowns to the Carolina Panthers and then lost. How they were beating the Patriots and then lost. And one common theme was their defense. Now this year, the Giants spent a lot of money on their defense, and they fixed the defense. The defense played a lot of great games, but their offense struggled and had a lot of games where they just struggled, as I just said. For example, back-to-back games, the Steelers and Cowboys, the Giants had no points in the first half and only managed to, and on average, one of the worst points. Yeah, I'll get to the stats later, but the terrible offense for this year. Now, a big part of that is the running game. Now, the Giants' running game hasn't been so good this year. Paul Perkins did provide a bit of a boost at the end of the year, but other than that, Rashad Jennings, Shane Vereen, Orleans Darkwa didn't really do much for the Giants on the running game. And obviously, looking at some of the better rushing teams, you got the Bills, the Cowboys. The Bills had 170 yards rushing per game, which is about 90 more than the Giants did, almost 80 more than the Giants did, which is crazy if you really think about it. Of course, the offensive line was a big talk. The Giants' offensive line wasn't that great this year. Eli did get sacked a lot, but he was under a lot of pressure and threw 16 interceptions. Of course, Eric Flowers, obviously the biggest concern on that offensive line in terms of what he is. Now, not much bad can really be said about the defense. The defense played really great, but the Giants do have a lot of free agents such as Jason Pierre-Paul, Jonathan Hankins, who they do need to sign in order to keep their great defense. Now, moving on to stats real quick. On offense, the Giants were 25th in total yards per game, which is pretty bad. They had 330.7 yards per game, as well as being 26th in points per game with 19.4. They also had a -2 turnover margin, which is of course not good, especially when you have a defense that created a lot of turnovers. A lot. Now, on the passing game, the Giants had a decent passing game, considering Odell Beckham. I'm considering they didn't really have a great offensive line and no tight end threat, and really Odell Beckham was carrying the offense, but with Sterling Shepard having a few great catches and Victor Cruz having some part in there. But they were 17th in passing yards per game with 242.4, 13th in passing touchdowns with 26, and they were also tied for 8th in most interceptions thrown with 16. Ugh. Now, rushing game was one of the worst in the league. They were 29th in rushing yards per game, which was with only 88.2, and they were last in rushing touchdowns total, which was only 6. They also fumbled the ball twice. Now, moving on to their defense. Their defense was actually 10th best in yards given up per game with 339.7, and 2nd best in points per game with 17.8, obviously the Patriots being first. Now, also 23rd in passing yards per game with given up with 251.1, but they gave up the second least amount of touchdowns, passing touchdowns at least, with 15, and they also were tied for 4th in picks with 17, so they had a +2 interception to touchdown ratio. Margin, not ratio. Not bad. They also, on defense, on the running game was great. Damon Harrison completely helped make this team a great run stopper. He was a great run stopper for the Giants, and they were the 3rd best team in rushing yards per game given up with 88.6, and they were also 5th in the least amount of TDs given up rushing with only 10, which is pretty good considering a lot of teams rush the ball at that 1 yard at like the red zone, and the Giants like had some really big stops. Now let's get into the offense. Now I did use a lot of different sources for this, from the Giants stats rosters as well as spot rack as for my like free agents and a bunch of other drafts. Now keep in mind I don't really watch. I do watch a little bit of college football, but I'm not a huge like I don't know a lot. Like I don't like what like I'm not like super detailed with how good the players are. So I use the mock draft as kind of like to see what analysts say, and also I use my personal opinion from watching a little bit of college football. So those sources are down in the description. If you want to check them out, you can. They're a little old. I tried to get them as new as possible. I tried to get this video out as fast as possible. But, you know, sometimes life throws you lemons and you try to make lemonade, but that lemonade just takes a while. Those lemons may not be ripe, you know. You need to let them ripe. Yeah. And I probably should have used bananas for that situation, but whatever. Now, moving on to quarterback. Quarterback is the biggest position in the sport, arguably. And the Giants have a pretty good quarterback, in my opinion, and that is Eli Manning. Now, Eli Manning, this year, through, as you can see, his stats are on the screen. He had a pretty good completion percentage with 63% completion. He had over 4,000 yards, which was, I believe, 13th in the league. He also had 26 touchdowns. But a big number that jumps out at you is 16 interceptions, which is 4th most in the league. He didn't get sacked a lot, but of course, Eli Manning, the whole debate with whether he's an elite quarterback or not. I mean, I thought he played good this year. He did make a lot of really good passes. I feel like maybe, I watched a bunch of footage from, games, and I've seen a lot of plays where Eli could have done better, but at the same time, the offensive line did fail him, or at least the tackles failed him. Now, some options the Giants have when going to, now we all can agree, the Giants need, and I mean need, to get a, what do you call it, freaking, what do you call it? A backup, at least. And you need to start developing Eli's eventual successor. So, what they could always do, of course, I think something that is not going to come to a surprise of everyone, is not going to be a surprise to anybody, they're going to stick with Eli. He's 36 years old, which is not super old. I mean, look at Tom Brady. Now, Ryan Nassib, I believe, is a free agent this year, so the Giants do have that. He has thrown only 10 career passes, but he's been pretty good in them. I mean, he's thrown 1 touchdown, and he's completed all but 1 of them. Not bad, Nassib. Now, some things the Giants could do in terms of options include signing some free agents, including Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk Cousins is 28 years old. Now, he threw for almost 5,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and he did appear in the Pro Bowl. Now, one thing that this would cause is controversy because Kirk Cousins isn't a quarterback to develop. He is already a starting quarterback. He's already a bona fide starter. So, if you do go after Cousins, I mean, they may not be able to even go after him this year because it would cost him draft picks. But if you do go after Cousins, I mean, is it really, do you really need him right now? I mean, are you really willing to just give up on Eli so fast? I don't know about that. Now, if they were going for a backup, they could always go after the famous backup Ryan Fitzpatrick, of course, from the Jets. Had a terrible year this year. 34 years old. Just a 56.6 completion percentage. Just under 3,000 yards. 12 touchdowns, but 17 interceptions in 2016. He didn't play that many games. I mean, actually, no, he played games. He played a majority of the games with the Jets, but he did miss a good few. Now, Fitzpatrick would be a decent starter. I mean, he does have that veteran, leadership. He does have a tendency to play well, in certain situations. I mean, last year he played very well with the 2015-16 season. He played great for the Jets, but, could always come in and do a great job here. And then the next 2 options are the Buffalo Bills quarterback situation, Tyrod Taylor and E.J. Manuel. Now, Taylor had a pretty good year from what the stats said. I don't know why, fans don't want him, but he had a lot of rushing yards. He also had a lot of, he had a good completion percentage, a very good completion percentage, in my opinion. He didn't have that many yards. He only had 3,000 yards, approximately. But he did have 17 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, which is pretty good. He did take 42 sacks, though. Now, I don't know why that is. Maybe he just, his play style kind of, I don't know. I don't watch Buffalo Bills games. In fact, the only Buffalo Bills game I watched this year that he played in was week 2, and I wasn't paying attention to how he played. I was more paying attention to how the Jets offense played. So, again, Taylor could be an interesting option, but again, he is kind of like, he's probably going to go to a team where you can start right away. And then Manuel, he's probably the most interesting option because he is a younger QB who could also be developed. As you can see, stats on the screen, not really the greatest, like, stats, but not, like, unbelievably terrible to the point where it's, like, unbearable. But, yeah. Now, quickly moving on to draft options. Now, there's 3 big quarterbacks who I could see, like, the Giants drafting. Now, first up, we've got Mitch Trubisky. Now, he's listed at second on every mock draft that I used. And he had a pretty good, like, year. A lot of people saying Trubisky, like, there's 2 sides to the story. There's people saying Trubisky is going to go, like, he's definitely the quarterback you want to draft. And there's the other side of where he's not worth it. It's just because he's a quarterback, and that's a big need. Same thing with Watson. Of course, he had that big game for Clemson against Alabama. I did watch that game. He's been very impressive. He listed to go first to the Browns, 10th to, I believe, is that the Panthers? No, the Bills, sorry. And then 27th. So, he had some pretty good stats. I like his stats. I think he could be a great starter. He could be, I mean, he's listed to go in the first round. He could be somewhat of like a new Dak Prescott-like player. Except not drafted later rounds. Deshaun Kaiser, another guy going a little bit under the radar. Well, not under the radar. There's also Patrick Mahomes. A few good names in there, but I kind of narrowed it down to these 3. Yeah, of course, the Giants could use their 23rd overall pick to draft one of these guys if they're available. Although, I mean, they might not. The thing is, it would work, but the Giants have other needs, and I think the Giants might be in a position where they might want to draft somebody who, like, they need now. That way they can make a run at a Super Bowl, at their 3rd Super Bowl for Eli. Now, moving on to running back. Now, this year, two big running backs. The Giants really used, like, 2 big running backs. Let me find where I put the slide. Now, there were Rashad Jennings and Paul Perkins. Now, Rashad Jennings had 181 rushes for 593 yards, which is about 3 yards per attempt. Not that great. He also had 55.6 yards per game and 3 touchdowns, which is, again, okay. But what really impressed me was Paul Perkins. He played in 14 games, but he only started 1. He only had 112 rushes, but he did have 456 yards, which was, I believe, 5.1 yards per attempt, and 32.6 yards per game. Now he's a rookie. Obviously, he is like needs time to groom, but I was very impressed with what I saw with him. Now moving on to options here. Now options, obviously the Giants need to improve their run game. Of course, their run game has not been good at all this year, or it was not good last year, I guess you could say, considering the year is over. But you know, they could always go the route. I think this could be one of the situations where you just give Perkins more rushes. You know, maybe improve his offensive line, of course. But Perkins definitely impressed. He had a 1,000-yard game, a 100-yard game, a 100-yard rushing game, which is the only one for the season for the Giants. He did have a rookie. He had 4.1 yards per attempt, apparently. Wait, I think I actually said 5.1. I mean 4.1. He did have a lot of good impact for the Giants. I think he could definitely be a great threat. Now one thing is interesting. If he kept up the pace that he was at, he would hit 1,000 yards by 253. He would hit like 1,000 yards by less than 250 attempts. So, yeah. Now, if the Giants want to go out and sign a free agent, they could always go after LeGarrette Blount, Eddie Lacy. Leonard Fournette is another big draft option. But moving on to Blount, Lacy, both those guys are kind of older. I mean, Blount just came off a great year, he had like 18 touchdowns. He would be a great option for the Giants, maybe, but he is kind of getting like old. And I mean, is it really much to wonder when you have Tom Brady on your team? I mean, he may not resign with the Patriots, but he's not the Patriots player I think Giants fans wanted to sign. Eddie Lacy, 26 years old, kind of young. He came off a badly injured year, but if he did play, he only played like 5 games, but if he played 16, he would. You can see he was on pace for a pretty decent season. Now, if the Giants went with the draft for this position, they could always go for Leonard Fournette, but they'd have to probably trade up for him. He's listed to go before the 15th overall pick on each, before the 16th overall pick on each of the drafts. The Giants have the 23rd. So, again, Fournette pretty impressive, but what really impresses me is Dalvin Cook. I think Dalvin Cook is probably the better option if they do go for one. I mean, he had a great year. He had a lot more yards, a lot more touchdowns. He didn't have as great yards per attempt, but he's listed to go kind of around like 14th is his highest, 27th is the lowest. He can go according to the drafts. So he might fall to the Giants. Giants might want to pick him up. And then Christian McCaffrey could be another decent option. Again, he's also had a pretty nice year in terms of stats. Now moving on to wide receiver. Now this is an interesting position. Now wide receiver, of course. Where is it? Where's wide receiver? Wide receiver. Now, of course, you have Odell Beckham Jr. Nothing's gonna change here. Top 5. Arguably in my list, he's probably 3rd best receiver in the league, if not better. 3-time Pro Bowler, offensive rookie there. He had another 100 catch, 10 touchdown, 1,000 plus yard season. He's not going anywhere. And of course, last year I believe it was in the 2nd or 3rd round, you drafted the rookie Sterling Shepard, and he had a very good year. He had 8 touchdowns. He also had 65 catches for 683 yards. And 8 touchdowns. Of course, Victor Cruz, who was coming off injury, he did have a decent year, but he only had 1 touchdown, which was at week 1. He was, of course, recently cut, which really sucks. I mean, it's a player as a Giants fan, I'm going to miss a lot. But you know what, you gotta do what you gotta do. So, of course, now moving on to some options for the wide receiver position. You can keep wide receiver as it is. I mean, you do have some pretty decent young wide receivers, I'm sure, on the roster who would be nice. And of course, Shepard's probably gonna have a big step. I was pretty impressed by how Shepard played. Now, if they did go for someone to sign, they could also sign Alshon Jeffrey if he's available. Of course, one of the receivers in the league who, if you put him with a great quarterback, I mean, putting him with OBJ would be great. But the thing is, I don't know if they're gonna undermine Shepard like that. Garcon would be another good one, but he's more of a secondary threat. I think the Giants are looking for a very dangerous third receiver, and that's where Deshaun Jackson could come in. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, of course. He had a great year last year. He could be somebody who the Giants put in the slot a lot, and then maybe take the pressure. Take the pressure off OBJ. Get as many players as you can to take the pressure off OBJ. Anquan Bolden, Terrell Pryor, Brandon LaFell, also some pretty solid options there. And then moving on to some draft options for the wide receiver position. The Giants could always, of course, remember they drafted Shepard last year, 2nd round it was. They could go for Mike Williams, John Ross, or Corey Davis. All those guys are probably going to go before, but if one of them falls, maybe it could be a good option. Although I don't think wide receiver is what the Giants are going to really heavily draft on, but I do think they might draft someone who could take the pressure off OBJ, and yeah. Now let's move on to tight end. Now, the tight end for the Giants this year, his name was Will Tye. He had 48 catches, a touchdown, and almost 400 yards, which is pretty decent. He is pretty young, so it could give him time. Maybe he gets a little bit better. But he wasn't unbelievably special. Now, this is the part where you have options here. Now, of course, you could develop Tye and hope he turns into something special. Or you could go after Martellus Bennett. Of course, Super Bowl champion Patriots probably not going to be able to keep their entire team. Bennett might easily be one of the guys off, especially with Gronkowski. He had a pretty decent year, 55 catches for 701 yards and a touchdown and 7 touchdowns. Of course, he would be a big threat. Of course, he's a former Giant. Now, of course, if the Giants didn't want to go and sign him, I'm sure there's other great tight ends out there, but really, it's Martellus Bennett. They could draft O.J. Howard, who's listed to go to the Giants, but also listed around the Giants position. Or they could go for someone named David Njoku, who's also listed to go to the Giants several times in the mock drafts. Both these guys would make great threats. Someone to take the pressure off OBJ. Especially the Giants don't really have a great tight end. If they added in a great tight end, you got Odell Beckham, the elite receiver. You got Shepard, who's a very solid option. Some probably young rookie playing 3rd wide receiver, and then you got a good tight end, a good explosive tight end. That really helps take the pressure. Maybe also someone who can block well. Now, moving on to the offensive line here. Now, offensive line could be a big problem. Now, offensive line, we're going to start with the offensive tackles. Now, this year, the Giants' offensive tackles were Eric Flowers and Will Beatty and Marshall Newhouse. Now, Eric Flowers, of course, first round pick from a few years ago. He has a big technique problem, ups and downs. He's had some pretty decent moments, but also some moments where he just let the defender run around him. Of course, Will Beatty, Marshall Newhouse, nothing really special there to mention about those guys. Now, there's always the option to move Flowers. A lot of people say he belongs on the right side. That could really depend on, hopefully for the Giants, if they do go for that, it works. especially if they move him to right tackle, because then you have like Eli's pressure on the right side. Like the most important position to protect the quarterback is probably left tackle, because most QBs are right-handed, and they can basically see the rest of the defensive line coming for them. But if a defender rushes from their blind side, which would be the left if they're right-handed, or right if they're left-handed, and the most are right-handed, then yeah, they're not going to see him. They might fumble easily. So Ereck Flowers would be a great option. If Ereck Flowers moving to another position might open up a space for someone like Andrew Whitworth or Sebastian Vollmer. Both guys would improve the tackle position. They're both free agents this year. If they wanted to draft someone, they could go for Cam Robinson, but he is listed to go a good bit before the Giants. Ryan Ramczyk could be someone the Giants might trade up a little bit for. Garrett Bowles could be another decent option, and then Forrest Lamp, of course, another good option. But Forrest Lamp is listed more as a guard now. I don't know, I've different mock drafts listed him as a guard. Some listed him as a tackle. I just put him here. Now moving on to the offensive guard position, this is where I think the Giants had a pretty solid players here. And Justin Pugh, of course, he's a Pro Bowl type play in 11 games. He's probably the best offensive lineman for the Giants. He missed most of the season with missed the rest of the season with injuries, sorry, but he did play in 11 games. He did play very well for the Giants. Now, John Jerry, the right guard, he is a free agent. He started all 16 of his games, but he was actually pretty good, to be honest. He was a great pass blocker, but he's kind of struggled a bit on the run blocking, as listed by Pro Football Focus. I don't remember the exact stats, but I know he had a pretty high pass blocking, but a terrible run blocking. And Marshall Newhouse, who I always said right guard and right tackle, kind of struggling. Now, if they could go with of course, I think the best option here is just stick with both guys you got. Resign Jerry, keep him here. I mean, you could always go for trying to improve the run blocking, but I think Jerry's a solid blocker, and I think he won't want too much money. T.J. Lang, another solid player they could go out and get. And Dan Feeney, of course, listed to go 26th and 31st in the draft. Forrest Lamp listed to go 25th. Another, by the way, if you're noticing some players have less numbers where they're listed to go, that means some drafts didn't list them in the top 32. And I didn't list them here. I only listed teams that were in the top 32. Or in the first round, basically. And last but not least, centers. Now, the big guy, of course, here is Weston Richburg, the second best offensive lineman for the Giants. He's listed 12th on Pro Football Focus. 25 years old, 16 games played. I mean, I'm not even going to cover anybody here because it makes literally no sense for the Giants to improve at center. They don't need another center, and they really need to worry about other positions. So, I mean, Matt Paradis, again, I think could be an option. I mean, there's several other options in the draft, probably. But I don't want to waste time talking about a position the Giants really do not need to improve. So, that's basically it. That's the Giants' offense and how they can improve it. Now, I'm going to make another video for the defense. What are your guys' opinions on this? You know, leave a comment. Leave whatever you want to talk about. The point of the video is to invoke discussion. I want you guys to discuss with yourselves and among your friends and show this video to them and really talk about what you want the Giants to do. And who knows, because it's something I really just want to see. I really want to see what people think about it. So yeah. So thank you for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. It took a lot of effort to make. So yeah. My defense video hopefully will be out soon. I mean, when I did the Jets one, I recorded both of them at the same time. I'm not gonna do that for this one, but yeah, you know what? I'll try my hardest. So see you next time. Adios, amigos.